Aloha from the big island of Hawaii. My name is Ragu Jufre with Ragunomics. I've spent the last 4 months writing the equivalent of 4 books. This is the culmination of those. President Trump has been moving so quickly that there's always a new development. And the punchline to all of those is that it looks that U.S. allies headed by Europe actually has everything they need to be the next superpower. The big deciding factor there is Canada's oil to replace Russia and Ukraine's raw materials alongside Greenland to provide the rare earths and other minerals. So between those three, Europe will now have all the raw materials and energy that they need. And the final piece of that is China, that has, they're sitting on $3 trillion worth of U.S. Cash, looking for an investment, and they are the gods of infrastructural, not just development, but the speed with it. So if China goes in there and builds it all out in record time, 1/4 of the time, they get 4 times the price that it would normally cost. Rough estimates run between 300 to 600 billion. China gets to walk off with 2 trillion, or if it takes them half the time, 1 trillion. But the point being is that all the elements are already in play. It's not that this has to be something that needs to be initiated because all the elements are lined up, but rather they're already in play. China's already working with Canada to build out their oil supplies. Canada and Europe, England are already in talks to, as part of their pushback against Trump. Japan and South Korea are reaching out to Europe. They make up the rest of the allies. So this is the summary of those books, and this is volume 1. So I'll be reading from that. Okay. The EU's 4 steps to superpower. The euro dollar is the new petrodollar. Headlines tell of America's old allies forming new alliances in their growing pushback against Trump. Canada with England, France with Germany, Japan with the EU. What becomes of these U.S. allies if they simply formed a new union all their own? Now combined, same allies, no USA. We did the rough numbers on this. Welcome to the world's new superpower. Bigger than America and a lot nicer too. We can debate the validity, viability, and impact, but there are 4 main trends now in play. All the paths of brooks and streams, and you find the beginnings of a mighty river. Look a bit further and discover a sea forming. And so it is here to formalize and scale these trends to discover this new superpower. Number 1, Canada, the new Saudi Arabia, equals the euro dollar. Canada has all the oil Europe needs to jumpstart manufacturing. Number 2, China, the new Russia and World Bank. China builds and finances the $7 trillion enterprise against oil assets. Number 3, Ukraine, the new Africa. Ukraine and Greenland equal $7 trillion in raw materials and rare earth deposits. EU manufacturing has steady energy and raw materials for the first time. Number 4, UNOW, the new America. UNOW stands for the United Nations of the World, is the new superpower that Trump primed the whole world for. It's a walkthrough for Europe to now become. These 4 trends form a complete self-contained political, economic, and military union, as big or bigger than that of America. Yes, quite startling indeed. So that was the sort of the back cover jacket, if you will. Summary of economic strategy. This was intended to show how much U.S. allies carry and boost American hegemony. So I originally sat down and say, hey, Trump, you want to be a little bit more careful because if these guys ever got together, it could be a disaster. Got together and then decided to partner with China and leave America behind. It could be a disaster. And what we ended up stumbling upon is there's this whole superpower continent just sitting there, and like everybody's missed it. So we're hoping that this will change that. A cautionary notice to recognize the value of that role of the U.S. allies carrying and boosting American hegemony. A cautionary notice to recognize the value of that role and to be more respectful of it. We instead came upon this stunning revelation that U.S. allies average 50% of America's power upon the world. So when it comes to the U.S. Petrodollar, it actually represents about 70% of it. So about 56% is the euro, and if I remember correctly, Japan is like another 12%, something like that. Anyway, so they're the muscle behind the U.S. Digging a bit further, uncovered that U.S. allies now have everything in place to be. We instead came upon the stunning revelation that U.S. allies average 50% of America's power upon the world, sometimes more. Digging a bit further, uncovered that U.S. allies now have everything in place to be a superpower in their own right. Likely bigger than America by many measures. We share that discovery here today with others that would like to go over the numbers and review the prospects. Synopsis: Canada, Greenland, and Ukraine supply Europe and all of America's old allies with energy and raw materials worth $7 trillion. The EU independence, now a complete ecosystem of energy, manufacturing, raw materials, tech, and a market of 800 million consumers, which equals $33 trillion GDP. That's 10% bigger than the US GDP. This includes a $1.5 trillion annual defense budget, larger than US, China, Russia, and India combined. China builds the oil infrastructure while also financing the $6 trillion in deals for its $12 trillion in returns. It's a great deal for China. Canada, Ukraine, and Greenland repay this in President Xi's favorite currency, oil and raw materials. No capital required of the EU or Canada. The final challenge now cleared. So Europe's biggest problem, they had the technology, had the manufacturing muscle, and they had the goods that the world wanted. America shut down the oil, and now their manufacturing is imploding. And so now it looks like the entire EU is getting ready to disintegrate along with NATO. So Canada has the oil. And then you throw in Ukraine, and they have the raw materials that they were previously getting from Africa. China builds the oil infrastructure. So then the one that has the cash. So where do they get the money from? China's sitting with $3 trillion worth of cash from all of their trade with the U.S. They don't have a place to put it. This is an absolute dream place for them to put it into. Canada, Ukraine, and Greenland. China builds the oil infrastructure while also financing the $6 trillion in deals for its $12 trillion in returns. That's actually, most of that just in the next 3 years, because they are being paid back in oil. And Canada has trillions of dollars worth of oil once China builds that infrastructure, so they can get as much oil as they want on demand. Canada, Ukraine, and Greenland repay this in President Xi's favorite currency. We discovered that Xi now has China's Belt and Road 2.0 in partnership with Europe and America's old allies. So everything that Xi was hoping to accomplish with the Belt and Road initiative, where he was building out ports and helping exclusively developed nations to connect them back to China. Well, it turns out that Trump just put it together for China to do that with and for Europe. And Europe is looking, where's the financing? Who are going to tag team with? Bring in the muscle. China's the muscle. Europe is the centerpiece. Canada's the oil. Ukraine is the raw materials. And then you have, England and the Arctic states and Japan and South Korea, maybe Turkey as well, to scale the numbers up to that 13 trillion. Xi now has China's Belt and Road 2.0 in partnership with Europe and America's old allies. Xi will be ecstatic, and this will be a saving grace for Europe. U.S. allies now transformed into the superpower upon the abundant energy and resources from those of Canada, Ukraine, and Greenland. It's a match made in heaven, all thanks to Trump. Free of dependency upon America, Russia, and Africa at long last. So I'd actually completed this day, 4/6/25, Wednesday, Ram Navami, that was last week. Appearance day of Sri Ram, aka the original Raghunath. Raghunath is actually my full name. I go by Raghu for short. Raghunath, for whom Raghunomics is named in honor of, and his birthday gift to this very day. So Raghunomics, this is actually a book between 31 and 32, depending on how we divide the books. This is actually done as a tribute to Ram. Lord Ram was the King Solomon of Vedic India, and this is the economics of the ideal king and kingdom. And so the name of the article, The World Reinvented, and this is just listing those four primaries that we started off with. Number one, Canada, the new Saudi Arabia. And I don't know how Canada is like, they're sitting with twice as much, like 80% more oil than Russia. They're the new Persia Gulf. They're the new Middle East, the new Saudi Arabia. They're the new Saudi Arabia if they connect with Europe. Europe's need for Russian oil supply is replaced by Canada. A, Canada holds about double the oil of Russia. B, Europe will do for Canada, as America did for Saudi Arabia in starting the petrodollar. That's what we're seeing here. If these two can actually come together, it will launch Europe as the new America, in that they have all the resources and cheap energy. And Canada is, I believe Saudi Arabia is 1 trillion. Anyway, this should add about another $500 billion to $1 trillion to the Canadian economy. D, Europe is now energy independent for the first time. E, Canada, the new Saudi Arabia. F, their GDP to jump 20 to 30% starting their first year. So anyway, these are the numbers that I'm going online to have people reach out and help me confirm these numbers. Hopefully I'll find somebody to tag team an institution, or it'll be a lot of fun. This is the reason why I'm going to post this on X. Hey, let's do it from the people, grassroots. And I really like X because it's real time and people can respond and we can build this out. And I think we could probably take this from launch to, from concept to launch just on X. So that will do wonders for really solidifying how much can be done with them. Number two, China, the new Russia and World Bank. China builds and finances Canada's infrastructure to match Russia's oil supplies to Europe. A, Canada repays China with oil. There is no capital burden to Canada. China can consume most any amount of oil that Canada can produce. So without taking a penny off of their capital, because when Europe was talking about, how we're going to do an economic stimulus or get our military budget or do these developments, the only money they could think to turn to was the savings of the European citizens, and that was not going over well. But with China, they're sitting on the cash. They're hungry for raw materials and oil, and Canada just, it's the Arctic. They're as big or bigger than the Middle East. Excuse me. B, Europe gets 2 to 4 years of subsidized oil to jumpstart their manufacturing, 25% less Putin's prices to Asia today. So Europe's been taking a really big hit while Asia's been getting all this cheap oil from Putin. They've been paying, I think, 2 or 3 times the price of Russia's and double because of America. And so this will provide a subsidy of energy to them to allow them to catch up. D, China gets a 4-fold bonus over normal cost if the soil development is completed in 1/4 of the time. So normally it takes, to build out a well, 1 to 3 months. To put in a refinery, it takes 2 to 3 years. If China can put the entire package together in just 6 or 8 months, 8 months, which is 1/4 of the time, they get a 4-fold bonus. If they can do it half the time, they get a double bonus. So 8 to 12 months versus 2 to 3 years. Normal cost $400 to $600 billion. These are my rough estimates. That might be more or less. People can look at those numbers. China bonus $2 trillion if finished on time, or $1 trillion if they finish in half the time. So $2 trillion for 1/4 of the time. Canada pays in oil. Europe prepays Canada over 10 years. Repays Canada over 10 years, about 2% of GDP. So anyway, we're just working with what's the formula, what's the format. And these aren't complicated. So these are just working models to begin the conversation. And you'll see, first of all of this is already in play. China and Canada are already working together. Canada and England are already working together. And Europe is there. And so this is really just saying, guys, you are like 2 steps away from being able to formalize this into a multi-trillion-dollar thing where you are now the superpower, because all the factors have come together. Thank you, Mr. Trump. All of these players owe Trump big time. E, China gets oil from Canada's Arctic worth $2 trillion. So $2 trillion. It's like any amount you want, whatever you could build in order to provide that. China now gets from Canada. F, this gives Z the same volume as Russia's oil supply today. G, China is now the new Russia. They can sell this oil, and so opening a new venue source besides manufacturing. So China's been trying to figure out how to get direct access, how to get access to the new Middle East, which is the Arctic that's opening up. And China's saying, here you are, up to $2 trillion, knock yourself out. And so if China can scale, which they've generally always been able to do to, genie-like, near instant, then they can sell as much oil as Russia is. And the independence from Russia, I think, is something they would like as well. Oh, and so they won't be entirely dependent on, with this oil, they won't be entirely dependent on manufacturing and exports as they are today. H, China finances you now $7 trillion budget. That includes $1 trillion for developing the electric vehicles. That's $1.5 trillion a year for the defense budget. So about half of that would be paid 2.5% GDP of the U.S. allies, and the other 1.5% to 2% would be carried by China. China, the new IMF and World Bank, but 4 times bigger. So if China does this, they've instantly replaced the IMF and World Bank at between 2 to as much as 5 times larger. J, welcome to China's Belt and Road 2.0, now in partnership with Europe and the rest of America's old allies. So the reason why China is sitting on $3 trillion of cash, and they still have $1 trillion worth of U.S. holdings, is that there's really all these other countries that they've been working with their Belt and Road program do not have the infrastructure to be able to handle the volume of cash that China has. Europe does. L, these numbers are but an example to the kinds of immediate economic prospects to be tapped once we see U.S. allies for the value that they offer. So are the numbers bigger? Are the numbers smaller? Whatever those final numbers are, once we've completed this review, is simply this is simply a stand-in to how much immediate potential is right there for Europe, which, because of President Trump's, America first, he is blind to it. So this was originally intended to be a messaging to Trump to say, hey, this is, you're playing with fire on the one side, and it's a really great opportunity on the other. Do the numbers, cut, slice and dice them any way you want. It's a great deal to be part of helping Europe really sort of come into their own, and it could be a potential nightmare for America. Number 3, Ukraine, the new Africa with China as peacekeeper. Ukraine, $7 trillion in rare earth minerals now used by China as the hard asset to finance Europe's $7 trillion budget for this new development and military independence. So people have questioned whether or not Ukraine has that much. Between Ukraine and Greenland and Canada, there's definitely $7 trillion, which is about the budget needed in order to launch. We're talking about this year. A, Europe no longer dependent upon Africa for raw materials. This is a really big deal. So they don't need to do any more, it just didn't sit well to, they were just overtly exploiting Africa. They don't need to do it anymore. It's right there with Ukraine. B, China repaid in raw materials. Europe repays Ukraine over 20 years. So China gets their pay in oil and raw materials, and then the rest of the EU is repaying Canada and Ukraine back in cash. So we came up with a figure of 20 years because Ukraine would get back 25% more income than what Ukraine was getting before Putin's invasion. Oh, and here's the clincher. China peacekeeping force in Ukraine is guarantor to Putin's demands for a neutral country without threat to Russia. So China can provide everything by going in there and saying, Putin, don't worry, we got it. You're taken care of, all your fears. Putin can't say no to China. Russia's invasion ends with China's withdrawal support. So these 4 books that I did this month is a culmination of the 5 books that I did over the last 4 years talking about the Russia-Ukraine invasion. One of the big discoveries is that Ukraine actually beat already Zelensky already beat Putin, and now has been taking on the entirety of the axis of evil, which is Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China. So Putin supporters, to put it in derogatory terms, those that really sympathize with Putin, they can't accept that. But in this context, they can. That if China pulls out, it's the end. So Putin has no choice but to accept China's deal. And China is saying, everything that you've made an issue, I can take care of it. Putin can't say no to China. Russia's invasion ends with China's withdrawal of support. Peace through strength is the ultimate power play. China holds all the power to settle this war in Ukraine. So everything that Trump is hoping that he could have done, China actually has the power to do, which is the sort of the crown, that sort of like formally crowns China as the new world hegemony in place of the U.S. And peace in 24 hours, as Trump said he could do, as he actually can. Number 4, you now, the new America. Each of these steps are already in motion. We simply showcase how scaling them a bit further begets this new superpower. A, called United Nations of the World. I have some other names there, but that's a stand-in for right now. But it's a great acronym. You now. United Nations of the World. B, you now replaces NATO and the EU with this larger alliance. So there's been so much talk about how Trump is threatening the very survival of NATO and the EU. And even if he didn't, completely pull out, it looks like they're outdated and they might fall apart. And you now shows that that's not necessarily a negative. It's that they can actually graduate to the next level. D, Europe, Canada, China, and Ukraine form a self-contained ecosystem of raw materials, manufacturing, finance, and a mass market of 2.2 billion people. So everything that people are trying to get from China, it's right there with this UNOW alliance, along with the military fitting a superpower. E, Trump is right. The U.S. has been subsidizing U.S. allies. Now, here's the net effect of it. This has left them with an artificial sense of dependency. So everything that conservatives say of welfare, that it just creates artificial dependency and people are actually significantly more capable of taking care of themselves than the government gives them credit for, but the Democrats are just using it to control them. Well, that is actually true when it comes to Europe. Because they've been all the pieces have been there. They've been in play. Trump is simply waking to it. Trump has awakened this sleeping giant, a superpower shackled no longer to U.S. dominance. Trump just killed American hegemony. So that was actually the third book. This is being the fourth, which is Trump just killed hegemony, based off the same points that I'm making here. This is just being a summary of it. F, Trump's annexation of Canada and Greenland is much like bullying other U.S. allies. The level of cooperation and synergy Trump looks to gain was already achieved by America's line item subsidies in trade, military supplements, and capital offsets. So all the big talk of all the, we're going to take over Canada, and we're going to take over Greenland, and we're going to sort of bully, Japan and Europe to, give us a good deal on trade. America was already getting that level of cooperation. Excuse me. With the subsidies. And those subsidies were pennies on the dollar for the deals that America was getting with trade, with their currency, petrodollar supports, with their military, adventures around the world, support from them. And there was other thing I can't remember right now. Okay. Trump looks to the level of cooperation and synergy Trump looks to gain already achieved by America's line item subsidies and military. So that so-called, we were subsidizing their military. Represented almost $1 trillion worth of business for us. So we were taking a little something off the top of the name of subsidizing their military. The cost of those subsidies of the last decade is less than the first week's market and economic losses of Trump's tariffs. At what point is the so-called cure worse than the problem? So everything that Trump is hoping to be able to get, I mean, some people are saying it's 7 trillion. I've heard price, as high as 12 trillion. Um, the, his remedy may be significantly worse than what the problem was. G, the trade surplus, for example, represents just 1% now's GDP. Most of this GDP used to carry the petrodollar. So again, U.S. allies were carrying the petrodollar by, I believe they make up 70% of the petrodollar's trade. And so if they, for example, switched over to BRICS, the U.S. dollar would implode immediately. So that's that's like a theoretical or an editorial opinion piece. But the point being is that the 33 trillion of their GDP represents the bulk of the power of the petrodollar, and the total trade surplus of U.S. allies was only 300. I don't want to say only 350 billion, which is 1% of the GDP that's been supporting the U.S. dollar. So this was intended to be sort of a, pulling the curtain back for Trump and saying, hey, yeah, we're subsidizing 350 billion, but we have 33 trillion each and every year of their GDP supporting 70% of the U.S. dollar. H, America had a great deal going with U.S. allies. Trump just ended that golden era of American hegemony. So lose the allies, lose America's, Trump just lost America's hegemony. That power behind U.S. global dominance, U.S. allies, may be gone forever. There are dozens of moving parts to this project that have been reduced to just 30 primary component parts. They're listed in the essays below. Okay, so that was a summary to what was supposed to be the big coming out on Liberation Day. Unfortunately, I could not get my X account to work, so I just posted the headline. But this is what I was, and I did read it, but I was hoping to be able to read it live on that day. Liberation Day for America's allies. New superpower of the world, United Nations of the world, UNOW. Trump has designated this April 2nd, 2025, Liberation Day. This is to mark his tariffs upon the world to rebalance his sense of injustice to American trade. This Liberation Day may prove the perfect refrain for U.S. allies to officially announce their own break from Trump's colonial exploits, at least as they see it. I mean, this is a double-edged sword. This definitely works significantly better for America's allies than it did for Trump. But he's put everything in place, and he was doing it in the name of America. But all he did was just set everything up for America's allies to come in. And anyway, they can use this Liberation Day to declare, starting with the name, they can use this Liberation Day to declare their own independence from American domination, this time not as in individual states or small groups. So, they've been off, in one corner you got, England and Canada. In the other corner you got Germany and France. In another corner you got Japan. But as they are doing today, but to rebrand their alliance, the entire alliance of U.S. allies, as a completely self-contained sovereign, now free of their U.S. dependency. United Nations of the world, so simple a title for this global alliance. UNOW, a fitting acronym. It talks to the changing of the old guard for this new one. It's made of the world's democracies from those of America's old allies. You may hear the rain in the back. I decided to move forward with it today because it's the full moon, very powerful and auspicious full moon. So I wanted to ride on the power of that full moon to introduce this to the world. Trump is forcing the issue with an urgency that feels abrupt, but the trend has been in play for years now. Reasons like Putin is a big one. So Putin really scared the hell out of the Europeans, and even under Biden, they were feeling a little unnerved. Trump just really pulled the carpet out from underneath them, or rather pulled the curtain back. But there are many other reasons. The allies have a growing divergence of purpose and priorities from those of America. There's a list of need for better utility of economic prospects. So there's all these other economic things going on in America, just was not taking care of them. Military security, America was actually coming up a little weak. And for example, not responding more strongly with Russia and Ukraine. So this was this really, Americans weren't supportive of the war, but Europeans were, and so This was creating a rift. And foreign engagement outside those offered by the USA. And that was before Trump. So Trump is getting the blame for this breakup, but all he did was expedited it. A single alliance of their own outside America's lead is but a natural progression of these factors. Trump has simply fueled their own incentives to formalize the step right now. So he just added, he just, as Trump does, he just threw fuel into it. I love Michael Moore's um, uh, graphics of it. He said, Americans are voting for Trump as their Molotov cocktail into the system. So Trump is the Molotov cocktail. Critics portray this as America's old allies lashing out against Trump. We offer a very different story here. We are looking at the world's new superpower. Surprised, yes, but only the first of more to come. So everything is just like, it's really just history. History is, Trump has sort of come along and pushed over the edge what was already in play that was supposed to be in play. And he did it in the name of America, but actually, we really should be happy for them. They've been subsidizing us as Americans for years, and we should applaud and help them really step up as in the full glory of who they are. That's been hidden away by America. Initial estimates suggest now is likely bigger than America by most measures. If true, we have ourselves one of history's greatest global formation. I was thinking about it. When you take now, and especially if they partner with China with the speak of BRICS, this is the largest. Partnership in history. The largest. Empire is not the right word. Here's another startling discovery. These U.S. allies are the real superpower behind American hegemony. Is it hegemony or hegemony? Hegemony. We thought America the mightiest of all the world. It's not. It's actually America's allies. That's the big reveal here. That becomes obvious with this review. So really, that's just, all the other points are just sort of, trimmings to demonstrate that Europe has been the power behind America. It's their day. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's not, and it's not America anymore. It's actually Europe. We, the world, never realized it before. Neither did they, Europe. Trump has forced the issue and so uncovered the power behind America. Something like the Mercedes engine that was in the body of Aston Martin. That engine can now be removed from the U.S. petrodollar and headed over to EU's own political economic body of choice. So that's really what this whole thing is about. I've given one scenario as a working template, but there's 1,001 ways this can play out. That is the discussion. The EU can hand this over to their own political economic body of choice. That's the discussion we are introducing here today. The EU offers the natural center point for allies to rally around. The most obvious example of their power is House, 33 trillion GDP, 10% greater than that of America's. What happens if you now applied this GDP to China and BRICS currency, to the BRICS currency platform? That is to say that they also pulled out from the petrodollar. Well, in one word, kaboom! End of the petrodollar. So this was really just intended to be it actually started with this as a cautionary tale. Of course, little old, broke writer here in Hilo. Nobody's going to listen. But that was sort of the starting point. And then I was like, holy macaroni, holy cow. America's allies are the superpower. Okay. End of the petrodollar. Some may debate how or if this is even feasible. But remember, this is just one of hundreds of examples of the power U.S. allies play upon American hegemony. This Liberation Day is the opportune milestone for U.S. allies to formally step out from behind American dominance, the world to see them for the superpower they truly are for the first time. Dear American allies, it really is you now. It has been for some time. We may be getting ahead of ourselves. So, I don't want to say this is a fact, but um, it's easier to find critics to go back and look at your numbers than it is to plead your case and hope that they will take an interest. So taking these strong statements, I think, is the, but that's the way the numbers look at me too. I'm not just, this isn't just a political posture or a marketing thing. We may be getting ahead of ourselves. We do need to confirm the initial findings, but the imperative is set by these stunning prospects. It's just too many factors at play that make it look like it's true for us to ignore any longer. I use this day to reach out to others that would like to explore this potential. And really, that's what this is, who would like to join this little project. We have identified 30 component parts. Once combined and activated, the world's greatest superpower will emerge. Today's reigning giants of America, China, and Russia will find they have been blind to their real competition. It's not each other, but Europe and this now. The 30 component parts indexed below will sculpt a portrait that will have the power of now quite obvious to all. They will be overlooked no longer. Review, comment, or form new prototypes from the working models offered below. These are but the opening templates to begin checking their viability as an individual project and then in their collective. So each one of them, like if we just got one project, if we just, scaled up Canada to better support Europe, just that one single step of it, that's a great day. Again, with Greenland or Ukraine, or if we got China to come in and finance it, any one of those steps in of itself is terrific. You put them all together, and it's not a multiplicity as it is. It's a hybrid that has come together, and it's already come together. And really the only question is how much can we scale it? I call upon the power of your brilliant nerds. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to include myself with you. You are my superheroes. So I'm using this as an excuse to get you to let me in your circle. I call upon the power of you brilliant nerds here in Netsville, that's the internet, of a billion minds. And, come on, I'm just a little old village boy from India, village boy education. And this is what I've been able to put together with the social media information. So imagine what we can do, people, as the same kind of humbling. You can see my, living in the downstairs to my my tenants here. Imagine what a billion minds can do. Contribute to these 30 components listed individually to begin this venture. What better time than this Liberation Day to inaugurate? So the reason why I just decided to choose, we'll get to that in a minute. A shout out from each of you below with the simple now. Who would like to second this? Who's the first person? Here's a little summary to what the appetite for all those interested in having the building blocks to begin playing with these findings as the world's hottest, largest jigsaw puzzle, the greatest superpower. I mean, just in terms of like a novelty, hobby, this is it. This tops most any other. Examples of our rough estimates. Nations that would join this new alliance. That starts with the EU, of course, and Canada, as well as England, the Arctic nations, Japan, South Korea, and maybe Turkey as well. Probably Australia, too. Of course, others would want to join. That's before we get to BRICS or China. Europe is actually just the natural hub, it turns out. And that's what the one before this, Trump just killed American hegemony, is that America and Russia are actually the odd men out. And it's very interesting how they've been able to insert themselves into what is otherwise just a natural working relationship between Asia and Europe. GDP equals 33 trillion compared to America's 29 trillion, 10% larger than the US. 800 million people versus US at 350 million. That's before China joins. 12,000 military aircraft versus America's 13,000. I didn't realize that once you started, the really big turning point was Japan. Japan's really loaded up on a lot of planes there. But when you put them all together, a few here from England and a few there from the Baltic states and, a lot more from the EU and then more from Canada. When you put them all together, it's a big military force. 12,000 military aircraft versus America's 13,000. Defense budget, 1.5 trillion. That's bigger than U.S., China, Russia, and India combined. Yes, annually. So the EU members, they throw in 2.5% of their GDP, and the other 2.5 percent would be subsidized by China, which is 700 billion. So the EU comes up with 700 billion. China puts in 700 billion for 2 years, and that gives them 1.5 trillion for between 2 to 4 years. Combined, yes, annually. 3.5 million active military personnel, also larger than US, China, and Russia combined. I go over those stats later on. And so goes the list. Is this too good to be true? Is it? Is it too good to be true? Good. Prove it wrong or right, as inspired. And so the conversation begins, which is really what the important point is here. The important thing. The number is a beginning reference point to start this discussion. They allow us to scale and measure their impact and see if they truly reach the heights of the world's next superpower. So put in whatever numbers we are. Does it get it over the line as the next superpower? A simple example is their 33 trillion GDP. It becomes immediately clear that their GDP is the deciding factor behind the petrodollar, likely represents around, it's actually, I just confirmed it today, it represents about 70% of the petrodollar's power today. Now imagine if that power was thrown behind BRICS, China boosted along with the immediate fall of the US dollar. True or not, this is the kind of modeling we are looking for. Who would like fitting these many jigsaw puzzle pieces together? So I'm not here for the conclusion. I'm here to put the working model in, get different stats from different people that and see what is ever the most reliable to see if we can get the overall picture. That's really what we're after. The 12,000 military aircraft is another great example. They carry about 8,000 fighter jets between them. That's 400,000 bombs, that 10 bombs per aircraft, and they deliver, they drop their load about every hour and a half or 2 hours. Delivered in just 12 hours. So in 12 hours, that's 400,000 bombs, at least in theory. So anyway, that's just, in an ideal world, that's what they'd be able to do. 10% that amount dropped in Ukraine would certainly change, quote, the realities on the ground, as Putin likes to call it. So whatever number you want to use, whatever number that is, if they went in there, combined all of their military jets, they could take out they could break the backbone of Putin probably in 12 hours. Yes, all dropped in a single afternoon. Yes, in 12 hours. Yes, all dropped in a single afternoon. That's what it means to be a superpower. It might take, 4 months. The question is how big are they actually? So these are just, again, working figures to get that started. Yes, all dropped in a single afternoon. That's what it means to be a superpower. Originally thinking the New York Times a good platform for this project, given the large page format or a broadcaster like CNN. So the problem that the New York Times or any of those large newspapers have is that they keep doing the same information that you're getting from any of the other social media outlets. But it's for a project like this where that extra large page would give them an advantage. So I was thinking of them or CNN, the dire need for original material. However, Twitter, X, may prove the strongest fit. X has no castle walls and big moats between their delivery and the public response. So outside of the control of their narratives, just the technology lags as compared to X. Real-time replies from the most humble of us and immediate dialogue between the smartest. X may well take this from concept to launch. That would certainly be a big leap into the everything app that Musk intended. Here's the first 6 component parts to United Nations of the World U now. Ideally, we can find a point man, woman for each category, preferably an institution with the expertise and resources to scale these working models properly and timely. So this is what it's taken me, 4 or 5 months to put this together, about 3 or 4 months to put this together with my extremely limited resources and somewhat more resources than experience. So imagine what we can do if we actually got proper institution with the resources and manpower. Here are the first 6 component parts, which we already summarized when we began. Number 1, which allies want to join? Number 2, confirm the combined GDP for those nations that signed up. So, is it 25 trillion, which is what the EU is as a standalone, or is it actually getting closer to 35 trillion? depending on what nations join. Number 3, Canada replacing Russia's cheap oil to Europe. So it's just killing me watching, Putin supporters saying, oh, well, Europe is broke because they don't get the cheap oil from Russia. Canada was just invisible to them. So if nothing else, if I can at least bring Canada out of the closet and say, guys, and it's like the world is just waking up to the Arctic. And my initial impression is the Arctic's actually going to be bigger than the Middle East because they don't just have oil, they have just a cross section of all of these raw materials, which just didn't have the same value even as little as 5 years ago as they do today as the technology becomes more advanced and demand for them. And also just it's a significantly larger geographic area. So I think that lends to additional developments that the Middle East doesn't. Okay, Canada replacing Russia's cheap oil to Europe. That was number 3. Number 4, China builds and finances Canada's oil's infrastructure. So basically what this is doing is what China was doing for third world. As soon as China does this for first world nations, they're the new hegemony. So it's a really big deal. It's Xi graduating into all that he has worked so hard for. And so this may not be so much about selling Europe on it. It's Xi just running with this. And, it's the culmination of everything he's been working at. 5, Ukraine provides the raw materials. So, people that were very sympathetic towards Putin were saying, no, he wasn't really interested in Ukraine. And as the trillions of dollars worth of wealth is coming to the surface, and as we see Putin resisting Trump saying, hey, you said you wanted peace. I'm here for you, man, in every way that you want. And Putin's like, I want to get a few more miles here. There's a little bit of, another $1.5 trillion worth of raw materials under this land that we want to get. So that changes the context. This doesn't have anything to do with politics. This has to do with geoeconomic controls. So Putin is not necessarily after land, but he is after monopoly. And this was going to be this, and the Arctic was going to really clinch complete a majority, if not a monopolizing power over energy. And so Ukraine is the natural counterpart for Europe than it is, at least in terms of culture and economics and political identity, etc. National identity, cultural identity. Ukraine provides the raw materials. 6, China's $6 trillion in deals equals $12 trillion in returns. So, for example, they put in the $500 billion to build out Canada. They get $2 trillion back. So the returns here are really big because it's not a cash return they need. They're taking it directly in raw materials and energy, which both Canada, Greenland, and Ukraine have plenty of. So they can be very generous about it without overextending those countries financially. China also finances 1.5 trillion defense budget. So that's the final clincher, becoming a superpower. Okay, now we're going to break them down. Here's the 7. Number 1, which allies want to join? A, European Union. B, England. C, Arctic states. D, Canada. E, Japan. F, South Korea. G, Turkey. You can see why this was like 4 months in the making. Like each one of these is its own series of essays, and then putting one more piece together and adding another piece, and you got a little. It's a jigsaw puzzle, so you get a little grouping of pieces fitting together here. You get a little grouping of pieces fitting together there, and it started with the countries, and then just see what each of them brought to the table. There are 2 parts to this. How many people from each region would be interested to join? So, like, I suspect, for example, like the Canadians would just pile on. Like, yeah, count us in. This sounds so much more attractive than being, it's sort of, what do they call them? The geisha girls, the girlfriend. Being a state to America is just being one of the harem to America's state. Another harem state of America to Trump. England, I think, would love it. I think Europe would be ecstatic. And we know the Ukrainians are going to pile on big time. So anyway, let's hear from you guys. And this is why X is such a great, X could just bring in 2 million people, in 48 hours. Type U now to add your vote and the nation you represent. How many people from Canada? How many people from England? Lend your name to this revolution. So if something does come of this, and if it does, it could probably happen literally like in 30 to 90 days. And you say, I was the 100th or the 1,000th. Your name will be there. This great, extraordinary history in the making. Who will be the first, or first 300, or 1,000? Let it be 1 million. Could, it'd be really cool. Hit 1 million in, I don't know, a week, a day. Depends on how many other people pick this up. Please forward this to the leaders of your nation to see if they would consider joining you now as well. So again, so it's not just that there's real time, but if we got 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 Canadians, tagging their leaders, probably could get, Canada, Canada, especially it's in election time. So, this is exactly the kind of thing that they're, high profile, a lot of people, a lot of engagements, exactly the kind of things that they would want to be, respond to. It takes just one leader from any of the given nations joining to get others to also sign. So if Canada joined, the Canadian Prime Minister really wants to push back against Trump, and if he does so, he'll get the other leaders from around the world to join in. This will prove X the world's single greatest instrument of democracy. There's never been a greater assembly of democratic nations as this would be. This is the social political convergence at a grassroots level by people on a single platform. This is the social, political, and economic equivalent of the sudden emergence of a whole new continent rising from the sea, but greater to all the others. So, just the massive, economic, political, military, and sheer numbers of people and geography. By any of those measures, would be the geographic equivalent of a whole new continent rising out of the ocean, or rather discovering that it's actually been there all this time. X may raise this entire continent single-handedly from but their own social media platform. It's a big deal. That's a big kudos to X. Hey, tag Elon Musk. You can get this in front of 500 million people in 24 hours. Number 2, confirm the combined GDP for those nations that signed up. How much? 33 trillion is the number I've been getting. It might be more, it might be less. I think that's about right. B, how much volume of the petrodollar is from UNOW's transactions? I'm pretty sure it's about, so I believe the U.S. allies represent about 70% of the petrodollar's engagement. See, how much would the dollar be hurt if you now sided with BRICS? Now, this is where you get into the high dramas and the terror of the whole thing. If they got together and say, yeah, Trump, listen, you figure out what you want to do. We're going to go join BRICS for a week or a month or whatever, or permanently. And that's where the real negotiations. And this isn't to put, I'm thankful that Trump did this. This isn't to beat up on Trump. Actually, I think that once Trump has been educated to that the real value here has actually not been America, but it's been them. If he pivots, the guy can pull rhinos out of hats, or at least this would give him the opportunity to do so. What would the mechanism and process be for you now switching over to BRICS? I'm looking forward to this conversation. I need more information on it, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that can offer that. But I'm under the impression this would be. I believe it's going to be easier than most people think, and here's the reason why. Today's SWIFT banking platform actually belongs to Europe, Belgium specifically. So Trump's trying you Russia and China, we're not going to let you use our platform. It's not America's platform, it's Europe's. This really, it just personifies how much America has been riding off of the power given by, they don't need Trump in order to. And so if they said, hey, we're going to make a new SWIFT just for you guys, and I'll let you guys run it as an example. The EU could offer BRICS their own version of SWIFT. This would be a great business move for SWIFT. SWIFT's taken all these hits for America, on America's behalf, and America's, bad mouthing them and beating up on them and screw you. So this would be a great move for SWIFT, actually. Bye, Donald Trump. Okay. Number 3, Canada replacing Russia's cheap oil to Europe. Okay, so each of these is going to be their own little sub post on X, and so everyone can respond accordingly to each of them. Number 3, Canada replacing Russia's cheap oil to Europe. Canada is the deciding role here. So, I mean, I figured this out 2 years ago when they were beating up on, Europe for not being, and America for not being more welcoming to Putin's oil. And I'm like, guys, Canada, Canada, Canada. So I'm really happy that if nothing else, I at least get to say, guys, you're it. Save the world, save Europe at least. Can Canada scale production to match Russia's old supply that ended with U.S. sanctions? I believe China would do that for them if they themselves couldn't. Can they provide it cheaper? And with the subsidy, if China was willing to provide that, they would. Yes, in both accounts, details below. B, who would like to help put this deal together? Anyone out there have a working relationship with Goldman Sachs or whoever the big boys are? Maybe a company from Europe. You don't have to put the deal together. China already has the working relationship in play. And the thing is that each of the players in all of these deals are doing it with a sense of vengeance and urge. Like, there is no business deals, this many of them all going on at the same time that are actually complementary to each other with this level of urgency because of Trump. Trump, you are a godsend. Canada's cheap oil is the deciding factor for Europe, whether they boom or bust. Canada hands Europe their own energy supply without the wars of the Middle East or the trauma of Putin. Yeah, so just this whole Arctic Canada, Greenland, and then you throw in the Arctic nations on top of it. And like, we get to have the energy supply without all the traumas that we've had to live with for the last century working with Russia in the Middle East or Africa. The rough estimates are 300 to 600 billion with the infrastructure to replace Russian oil supplies to Europe. We already covered that. E, can someone contact Canada if they would be interested in to be the new Saudi Arabia to Europe? Yeah, like, I would like to see any politician in election season say no to that one. You're the new Saudi. They are the new Saudi Arabia. They like how they missed that one. They didn't have a writer. Somebody hunched over. It's doing this. 4, China builds and finances Canada's oil infrastructure. A, $2 trillion deal for $600 billion investment in 1 year. So that's how much China get. They put in the $600 billion. They get $2 trillion immediately. B, the deal. 4-fold the normal price of built in 1 quarter of the time, 8 months versus 2 to 3 years. If there's anyone that could do it, in 8 to 10 months, it would be China. And for $2 trillion, they would. China pays itself the 300 to 600 billion to build, and if done on time, debits Canada the 2 trillion or 1 trillion if done in half the time. So there's really no money leaving China's pocket. They're going to pay they bring in their own teams. It's all their own companies and their own workers. They pay themselves that 300 to 600 billion, and then they just put the debit on Canada, and Canada pays back in the oil. And it would be 2 trillion if they did it in 8 months. It would be 1 trillion if it took them a year and a half. Canada repays this China bill in gas and raw materials, and so they have something of an unlimited tab. So it's like they can ask for as much money, they can offer China, as big of a bonus as China wants because they're paying in oil, which it's going to be this new reserves unleashed for the first time. China repaid in oil means no capital burden upon Canada. China extends the credit to themselves, their own team of contractors to build this project and then debit Canada for the work done. Canada pays China in oil, but it is repaid by the EU in cash. So China takes the repayment in oil and raw. There's a lot of raw materials and natural gas and things like that. And that would also include Greenland. I didn't get into Greenland because, it's just one more thing. I didn't want to, anyway, so many details. But then the EU turns around and pays Canada for that oil at 25% below Russia's prices today. And then whatever the difference is in that cost, they'll pay it over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. Canada pays China in oil, but it is repaid by the EU in cash. EU now pays back Canada over 10 years. And we came up with that figure because it's just 1 or 2%. EU now gets oil 25% lower over Russia's prices to help jumpstart the EU's economy. So this will rebalance all of the energy disadvantage that Europe had during this during Russia's energy subsidies to Asia. C, is there an institution or bank or political group that can do these numbers or contact Canada and China for this? Guys, this is a really big deal. It's already there. Basically, it's a deal that's already in play. This is just sort of a wise guy, fun way to sort of insert yourself into the middle of that deal and say, hey, listen, you can, we can do like, it's literally like 10 to 20 times more in business. And, when it comes to $500 billion, to speak of $2 trillion, you only need 1% to have a good day. D, Canadians, please forward to Canadian leaders. It's election season. Some guy off the street that reads this can mention it to him, and you got yourself, you've just changed history. Please forward to Canadian leaders, business and banks, and China. Number 5, Ukraine provides the raw materials. A, this gives Europe a complete ecosystem. Oil from Canada and now raw materials from Ukraine. This really completes the picture. This is just, it's funny that it's been sitting there and nobody has seen it before. So this is book probably 33 of the Reaganomics series. And really all I do, but I'm giving my multi-trillion-dollar secret away. All I do is I look across all the moving parts to see what the ecosystem once taken together. And then once you have the ecosystem lined up to clear out the bottlenecks and scale up the productivity and efficiencies and beauty of it is relatively easy. And this is one of the most exaggerated examples of it. But he did with healthcare, lifestyle insurance, would reduce people's healthcare costs 50% while doubling their service. Spent 5 years working on this. Leverage debt reduction, cut U.S. debt, federal debt in half, and the list goes on. And it's just taking the parts and once you put them all together, everything it blooms. It's an unfolding. Ukraine provides $7 trillion worth of materials. China pays itself to mine. Ukraine, like what they did with Canada, they pay their own guys and then they put a tab to it to be paid in raw materials. Ukraine pays in raw materials. Europe pays back Ukraine over 20 years. And again, I came up with that 20 years because that would be 25% more than what Ukraine was getting before the war. Meanwhile, it's like 0.5% of the EU's GDP, so it's very affordable. D, contact Ukraine and China or intermediate affiliates that could look at this deal. So guys, on X, if you see this, if you got a buddy that works at Goldman Sachs or works with oil or works with China, pass this on to them and say, hey, does this look viable? You just put yourself in this deal. So anybody that helps with this, to whatever degree I'm involved, of course, I'm going to bring you in. Chinese, please forward this to China's leaders or media. This will be one of the first times, anyway, this will be one of the times where the people are leading the leaders. So I just love thank you, X. X makes those things possible. Ukrainians, please forward to China and Ukraine leaders. G, Ukraine frees the EU from their dependency upon Africa's resources. It's not just the logistics of taking it, but it's been such a nightmare for them, as much of their own, moral standing, and it's just a nightmare with, all the revolutions and war and poverty. EU manufacturing now supplied with Ukraine's raw materials. Number 6, you now offers China $6 trillion in deals for $12 trillion payout in returns. A, repaying the $6 trillion over 10 years will cost just 2% of UNOW's GDP. This provides you now with cheap financing, affordable energy, and raw materials. C, Russia, Africa, and America now replaced by Canada, Ukraine, and Greenland. So, Trump's like, we don't need anything from you. And it's just so dismissive. He just didn't recognize what a gem these guys. He did have some sense of Greenland, but as an extension of America rather than their own right. And this is simply saying, if they were players in the full glory of their true prospects and potential, what would it be like? And that's all we've done here. D, EU now works because of this cash infusion from China based upon the vast gas and natural resources of Canada and Ukraine. So the financial gap that's been the strain of development, in addition to the energy and raw materials that has been really hard on Europe, between Russia, Ukraine, and Canada, takes care of those three. That's really what completes these resources have value because China can absorb that quantity of raw materials for payment. F, Canada and Ukraine are the missing pieces of the EU becoming the new superpower. If these two nations join the EU with the supplies, we have the new America. G, Ukraine completes this ecosystem of EU, the new America, Canada, the new Russia, and Ukraine, the new Africa. So you got everything that made Europe the golden child is now duplicated between Canada, Ukraine, and then it's not. At this point, the prospects are just so exciting that you don't need China, but China would guarantee getting it done quickly. 7, China also finances 1.5 trillion defense budget. We covered that. 8, China can settle war in Ukraine in one day. A, Putin can say no to China. Without Xi's support, China's war will collapse almost immediately, as I had mentioned earlier in the at the beginning. B, China meets all the demands of Putin. No NATO, no militarized Ukraine, guarantee of safety from U.S., and the remaining parts are outlined in the essays that follow. Anyway, so I got this written on time for Independence Day. Couldn't get it to work, and it appears that I'm not able to get my internet to work properly either. But I've been meeting my deadlines of delivery, and so here we are on the full moon night. It was written and completed. The writing was completed on Ram's birthday, and now I'm delivering it on the full moon. So this needs a lot of work, but the outline is there for those that are interested. Again, any one of these steps is a generally a multi-trillion, at least hundreds of billions of dollars. And if we can only tap 1%, want to speak of 5 or 10, great day for business. Guys, thank you for your time. Happy April 12th, full moon. Is it a red moon? Anyway. And, this is the latest contribution from Ragonomics. I'm hoping that this will be the big launch of Ragonomics. I'm finalized the nonprofit of Ragonomics, and I've really overextended myself to do this. Hopefully this will allow me to make up for lost income and give me the, provide me the resources to upgrade for myself and or tag team with, with an institution. I've been doing this all alone. I would love to, find a partner. If there's anybody that would like to tag team with me, give me a shout out. Big aloha from the Big Island here in my humble abode of Hilo. This is where I've been doing all the writing. It's a it's the impoverished writer. So this is what it means. I'm here in the bunker of Ragonomics. You guys have a beautiful weekend. Big aloha. Jai Shri Prabhupada, Jai Shri Sitaram.